The wedding reception hall drew the eye immediately, with its towering columns clad in mirrored panels along the facade. By sheer luck, our table had been placed right beside one of those columns. And I say luck, because when I glanced at the mirror to adjust my hair, I caught my mother-in-law, Katerina, watching me with narrow, suspicious eyes. I pretended to stay focused on my reflection, but through the glass I saw her tilt a small vial in her hand and let 1 or 2 drops of something fall into my wine glass. I didn't turn around. I didn't react. I acted as if I had noticed nothing at all. Just then, my colleague Olivia approached the table to say hello. As I greeted her, I casually switched the positions of the glasses on the table. The poison she had prepared with her own hands was now in her own glass, and the real drama was only just beginning. Let me know in the comments where you're listening to our stories from, and tell me what time it is where you are. I'd like to know who makes up this community. Most brides would panic in a moment like this, but I'm a nurse. I make my living in critical situations and emergency interventions. Panic is a luxury I cannot afford. What I felt in that moment wasn't fear. It was vital signs. In medicine, that term refers to the subtle, silent changes that appear just before a patient's pulse stops, or their breathing does. I walked over and sat beside Daniel. He is a cardiologist, a man who saves hearts for a living, yet he couldn't see the cancer sitting inside his own mother. Under the table, he squeezed my hand, his thumb brushing over my ring. He looked at me with such tenderness it almost hurt. He whispered that I looked beautiful. He had no idea that just 10 feet away, his mother was drinking champagne, the champagne she had prepared to destroy me. I looked across the table. Katerina was already seated, smoothly guiding the conversation with my parents, laughing at my father's remarks, playing the role of the benevolent family matriarch to perfection. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were cold and lifeless beneath layers of expensive mascara. She lifted her glass, my glass, in a silent toast. A smile full of mockery curled across her lips. She thought she was the director of this moment. She believed I was just a lucky girl who had accidentally fallen into her dynasty, and that I could be erased with a single vial of chemicals. I lifted my glass of water and took a sip. Katerina, in turn, took a sip of her champagne. In her eyes, I was like a viral infection in her son's life. She had called my profession disgusting and even offered me a 6-figure sum to disappear. But she had forgotten one thing about nurses. We know exactly when vital signs reach a critical point, and we also know precisely when a body is on the verge of collapse. I put my glass down, smiled at her, and waited. She always forgot to invite me to family dinners. She presented me to her friends as just a nurse. But the true critical moment had come 6 months ago. I had been sitting in her living room when she slid a white envelope across the marble table toward me. Inside was a check for $100,000. "This is a separation compensation," she said. Then she added, "Linda, you're a very kind girl, but let's be realistic. You represent new money. You heal people. We possess. You will never feel comfortable at this table, and I'm just trying to save you the embarrassment of trying in vain." I looked at the check. It was more than my parents had earned in 2 years. Then I looked at her. I didn't tear it. I didn't throw it at her face. I simply slid it back across the table and said, "I think you've undervalued life, Katerina. I am not for sale." And in that instant, her eyes changed. From that moment on, I was a threat to her, and she began plotting how to neutralize that threat. In psychology, there's a concept called the extinction burst. I had learned it from observing stressed patients, but it applies perfectly to narcissists too. A crying child doesn't calm down when it doesn't get what it wants. It screams louder, flails its hands, tears the room apart. It escalates its behavior to a frenzied peak before giving up. It's a last desperate burst of energy to regain control of the world. The week before the wedding, Katerina had her extinction burst. Bribes hadn't worked. Insults hadn't worked. The wedding would happen, and so she resorted to a scorched earth tactic. On Tuesday, she had called the cake shop to cancel the order, claiming the bride had been hospitalized with food poisoning. Thankfully, the baker had called me first. On Thursday, I found her in the bridal suite inspecting my veil. After she left, I noticed a sharp, jagged tear running straight through the lace. She claimed it had snagged on the ring, but I knew the fabric well. It was not a tear caused by a ring. I didn't tell Daniel. I knew that if I did, she would twist the situation to her advantage. What she was doing now was the final act of her extinction burst. She couldn't stop the wedding, so she decided to ruin the memory. She wanted to see me humiliated, weakened, and broken. She wanted to prove to every high society guest in that hall that I was fragile, messy, unworthy of their family. She wanted a disaster. I simply decided that she would be the victim of it instead. When Daniel finished his speech, the reception hall erupted in applause. He looked radiant, simple, flawless. He kissed me on the cheek as he sat down and whispered that no one was happier than he was to have me. The hall fell silent. Katerina stood. She raised the gold-rimmed champagne flute, the very glass in which she had poured poison. All eyes were on her. She smiled at everyone and then turned toward me. It was the look of a victor. "Marriage," she began, her rehearsed aristocratic voice filling the hall, "is a partnership. It's about knowing who you are." A few guests smiled. "And the most important thing," she continued, "is trust. Knowing that the person sitting beside you does not wish you harm." When she said trust, she looked straight at me. I didn't look away. I lifted my glass of water. Katerina raised her poisoned flute. "To the happiness of the young couple," she said. She brought the glass to her lips and drank. I watched her swallow the golden liquid, one sip, then another. She emptied the glass. For a moment, nothing happened. She sat back, looking triumphant. She turned toward my father and began talking about his heart surgery. 1 minute passed, then 2. I remained perfectly still, counting the seconds. And then, after exactly 2 minutes, Katerina stopped mid-sentence. She blinked rapidly, reached for her throat. Her face drained to a terrifying shade of gray. She tried to stand, most likely to reach the restroom, but her body refused to cooperate. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the tablecloth to steady herself, pulling the expensive centerpiece down with her. And then the chemical reaction took over. This was not a gentle faint. It was a violent collapse. Katerina vomited with a horrifying sound that sucked the air out of the room. It splattered across the head table, onto the silk tablecloth, the fine china, and her custom-tailored dress. The stench spread within seconds. A woman who had preserved an untouchable image for 60 years now lay on the floor in front of the city's aristocracy. "Mom!" Daniel shouted, jumping to his feet. "Mom!" She looked at him, eyes open but unfocused, her breathing labored. I don't feel well," she slurred. Then she collapsed sideways into the mess she had created. The room erupted into chaos. I stayed seated for 1 extra second and watched. It was disgusting. It was horrifying. And it was a perfect mirror of what she had planned for me. In emergencies, most people panic. As guests crowded around her in confusion, I stood up and took control. I told the band to stop the music. I instructed the coordinator to clear a path for emergency services. Daniel was on his knees beside her, checking her vital signs. His physician instincts had kicked in. "Pulse present, airway clear, pupils dilated," he called out. The ambulance arrived in 6 minutes. Katerina was lifted onto a stretcher. She was barely conscious, mumbling incoherently. As they raised her, the beaded clutch she'd been holding fell to the floor. The clasp snapped open. Its contents spilled across the parquet floor, a lipstick, a compact mirror, and an empty glass vial. Daniel saw it. He froze. But that wasn't the real evidence. Near the vial lay a folded sheet of thick paper. I bent down and picked it up. I knew what it was before I opened it. I had seen Katerina's handwriting before. I walked over to Daniel. He was staring at the vial, his face drained of color. "Daniel," I said quietly, clearly, "read this." He looked at me in confusion, then took the paper. I watched his eyes move across the lines. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for this unfortunate situation. Our bride has been struggling with psychological issues for some time. We had hoped the stress of the wedding would not affect her this way, but it appears alcohol was consumed excessively. Please understand the situation. She will receive the necessary medical care." It was a script, written before the wedding. She hadn't just planned to poison me, she had prepared the speech for my destruction. She would poison me, then frame it as drunkenness and a nervous breakdown. While I was vomiting, she would take the microphone and annihilate my reputation. I saw the change on Daniel's face. Watching a son lose his mother while she's still alive is a rare thing. The worry vanished. The panic vanished. His eyes turned to ice. He looked at the note, then the vial, then at the woman being wheeled away. The structure of the plan finally became clear. He understood who had authored this humiliation. Daniel folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. He didn't look at me. He turned to the paramedics. "This is not a stroke," he said. His voice sounded like cold metal. "She ingested an emetic and a sedative. Search her bag, secure the vial, and notify the police." Katerina was receiving treatment in a private ward. The medications flushed the toxins from her body, but the legal process was only just beginning. Police officers waited in the corridor. Detective Robert, a man who had witnessed decades of family tragedies, was taking my statement. There was no need for emotion. I just had to be efficient. I opened a file on my phone. By the time Katerina had been taken away, I had already coordinated with the event manager. Because I had volunteered at the estate's charity events, I knew every detail of the security system and exactly the angle the 4K camera behind the bar captured. Before the ambulance even reached the hospital, the footage had arrived in my email. I showed the video to the detective. Timestamp, 2:47. Katerina looks around the room. She retrieves the vial, pours the poison, stirs it. It was undeniable proof of a serious crime. Daniel emerged from his mother's room. He looked older than his years. He passed me and walked straight to the detective. "My mother is awake," Daniel said. His voice was cold. "She wants to give a statement." "Has she confessed?" the detective asked. Daniel smiled dryly. "No. She claims she did it to save me. She said I chase money, that I would destroy the Harrington legacy. She said one day I would be grateful to her." He looked at Daniel. This was the decisive moment. Either this would sever our connection, or it would suffocate us. Katerina had played her final card. The mother acts for good defense. After 30 years of manipulation and emotional control, she had hoped Daniel would abandon the charges. Daniel pulled a cream-colored sheet of paper from his suit pocket, a pre-written excuse speech. "Evidence of intent," Daniel said, handing the paper to the detective. "My mother didn't just try to harm my wife. She planned a reputational assault. She wrote this before the ceremony began. This is a clear indicator of intent." "Son, don't do this," his father whispered from where he sat. "She is your mother." Daniel turned to his father. "No," he said. "She is a criminal. If you pay her defender, you become complicit too." Then he faced the detective. "I am filing a formal complaint and requesting immediate protective orders for myself and my wife." I watched him sign the document. It was the deepest act of love I had ever seen. He didn't just protect me. He cut the seed that was killing us. With the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor, he excised her from our lives. There were no tears, only the sound of the pen, the official sound of separation between a son and his toxic mother. 12 months have passed since that day. Katerina is now serving a 24-month sentence for aggravated assault and creating a dangerous situation. Her defense tried to claim a psychological disorder, but the pre-written note destroyed that strategy. If you draft a public statement days in advance, you cannot later claim temporary insanity. Daniel and I did not return to the mansion. The walls of that massive stone building held too many memories, every room, every corner marked by Katerina's poisonous influence. Instead, we found a dilapidated Victorian house on the other side of the city. The floors creaked, the faucets dripped, the garden had long been abandoned. But it was ours. No painful memories, no hidden intentions, just a clean start. The first night we slept there, Daniel held my hand and said, "It's not perfect, but it's clean." I understood exactly what he meant. We no longer wanted to live in a home built by someone else. We wanted to build our own. We went through so many trials. We fought hard. At night, Daniel would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything his mother had ever said to him, trying to separate what had been genuine love from what had been manipulation. I, meanwhile, wrestled with guilt, wondering why I hadn't intervened sooner, why I had stayed silent. Therapy sessions were difficult. Some family members turned their backs on us, saying, "He's the son who sent his own mother to prison." But others quietly came forward to thank us. His grandfather, his uncle, even a distant relative. They admitted they had witnessed Katerina's behavior for years, but had never dared to speak up. And had Katerina not been arrested, our struggle would have continued. She would have slowly tried to separate us, planting seeds of doubt, controlling from the shadows. But we trusted each other. Daniel chose me, not just from the heart, but with conscious intent, and I refused to let him go. Now, a year later, we share dinner together every evening in that old house. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we simply sit in silence. But this silence is peaceful. It's not dangerous. It's the silence of people who have healed. If you have someone in your life who quietly spreads poison while smiling to your face, and you're ready to stop giving them space, share this story with someone in the same situation. Perhaps the strength they need is hidden in these words. And in the comments, tell me, what small, seemingly harmless behavior have you witnessed at a wedding or family gathering that actually carried deep disrespect? Because sometimes the smallest gestures reveal the darkest intentions.